Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake lie or imagination. And thank you all for loving our shows. And I think it's getting into the mainstream more in the US as well as in India. And I love all my viewers who are coming on the show. They're asking great questions. And do come to the Lit Fest in August 25, and it's going to be a big event in San Diego. Many prominent Indian authors are also coming, and also many prominent American authors will be there to discuss on common topics, and also book signings, and you can meet all those people in person. So I have a very special guest today, General Dhruv Katoch. Let us welcome. Namaste, General.
Thank you.
So one question comes in. Namaste is a very common greeting now in the US. People say it and they love it. So in the one thing I was wondering, changing world and changing India. So how do you see how the world is changing so fast? It's like literally, I mean, till last week, ours was the first channel. We declared the de-dollarization is going to happen. And it's just now in the mainstream now. Everybody is talking Fox News and CNN and every nation, and then the Summit of the Democracy. Every single country south of US said that they don't want to trade in the US dollar. I mean, it's so fast. What is your observation on this?
Thank you, Adityaji, and namaskar to all the viewers. The world is changing, and I think within the next 10 years, the change which we are going to see will be far faster than what the change which we have seen in the last 100 years. It is totally a different world. And I think there are four particular factors which are driving this change. One, there is a distinct shift in the pattern of world trade. Where the major economies, the trade used to be in the Atlantic, now over 50% is now in the Indo-Pacific. That represents a very major shift. Not that the Western countries are going down. I would rather say that from West Asia right down to Japan, the entire economic outlook has changed dramatically. And that is what has led to the change. This is one. Number two, the US is being challenged as the sole superpower. And the world will move from a unipolar world to a multipolar world. But as of now, the US still reigns supreme. It is the only superpower. But I think when we look into a few years ahead, that shift is coming, and that shift is certain. That is true. The third change which has taken place in the Ukraine war, and I think that has really hastened what you were talking about, the de-dollarization. Because when sanctions were put on Russia, then obviously Russia went into other modes of trade. But I think Russia had prepared for it. Russia knew what was coming, and Russia was ready. And now, with perhaps the BRICS currency coming up, the R5, possibly sometime in August of this year, we are likely to find a large number of countries also dealing with the R5, the new currency, the BRICS currency. And I have a feeling that the Saudis are going to join this particular currency. So when we are talking about, the petrodollar will no longer be the only means of exchange in oil. I think that we most likely we will see it very, very shortly this year or perhaps next year. But that change is coming, and that will be a hit on the dollar. But I don't see the dollar being replaced by any one single currency, and certainly not the yuan. For a very simple reason, the yuan is state controlled. It is not a free market instrument. And unless it is a free market instrument, the world is not going to trust it. But if we go into individual currencies, yes, countries will be more amenable to trade in those currencies. That is one. The BRICS currency, if it is backed by gold, they will be more amenable to trade with it. And the dollar is certainly going to take a hit. I think the day of the fear dollar I won't say it has ended, but I think the first signs are there that it is being challenged and effectively challenged. The dollar has been challenged before, and the US could still maintain its supremacy. I think this time around, it may not be possible for the dollar to maintain its supremacy, but the decline is not going to be something which comes up within a month or 2 months or 6 months. I think it will be a gradual process spread over, say, 2 to 3 years, or maybe even up to 5 years. But the process is inevitable. This change is going to come. These are the few thoughts which I had as far as the dollar is concerned. Aditya.
So one of the important, like we have discussed many things, the rules-based order we discussed last time a little bit, and the other things we discussed. Now, usually the question is from the students is right now, is that the world is openly talking about bilateral trade in their own currencies, and that really affects the prosperity in the US actually, because if the reserve currency status is lost, then Americans will have to withdraw the dollars, or most of the dollars which are already sent will be of no value. And gradually the printing of the dollars is going to reduce, which will also create a lower interest rate for many people in the US also, or maybe yes, it will create low interest rates. So the thing is, it is sometimes good for the US also right now, because given the scale of its economy, and it will be good for them, some people say like that. This is a question which has come. What do you say in that regard? I know it's a very economics question and maybe may not
Oh,
be. Yes, go ahead, please.
oh, you see, in this particular thing, as far as the US dollar is concerned, the fiat dollar has to go. There is absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind. The US cannot keep printing $1 trillion, which is not $1 trillion on a yearly basis, which is not backed by gold. So, if you have noticed the trends, I think if you just look at the trends of 2022 and the first quarter of 2023, I think the US is buying up large quantities of gold. So, at some point of time, I think the US will have to pin back its currency to the gold standard, which existed up to the 70s, I think, and till such time as the petrodollar came in. And then they unpegged it from, and then the fiat currency started and gave the US the privilege to print currency. But increasingly, I think countries are going to go in for trade on a bilateral basis. And the exchange of currency to some extent will remain the dollar, but the dollar will not be the only instrument. That is the way I look at it. As far as the US is concerned, I think it is going to affect very badly, or in a very extreme impact on certain industries in the US, especially the ones which deal with software. They are going to take a huge hit. The ability of the Americans, as far as the startups is concerned, to loan them millions of dollars, I think those days are also going to be over. The American per se in their offices, especially those people who are getting astronomically high salaries, I think those days are over also. There is going to be a downslide as far as salaries are concerned, and what impact this will have on the social fabric of the United States remains to be seen. But I think it is going to have an impact, and the very large number of non-US personnel working in the United States, I think a large number of them will prefer to return back to their countries because they may find the economic prospects there more suitable in the changed environment.
Yeah, I mean, less immigrants in the future, much lesser, because I think with the bilateral currencies, the value will also go down. People are already talking about $1 to 3 pesos, which is a Mexican currency, and right now it is 20. So that's what people are talking about. So in the recent Summit of Democracy organized by the President Biden, India made a very forceful talk about the mother of all democracies. And various other countries, such as Mexico and South American countries, openly spoke about the American hegemony. Openly. It's not even hidden now. It's been continuing, and they were openly talk about it. So, how does India feel about this topic, where Indian Prime Minister made a very forceful speech on how India is the mother of all democracies?
Actually, I think there has been a dramatic shift in India's foreign policy. And this has been led by one man. It has been led by Narendra Modi. That is something which is undeniable. But though Modi has led it, he had two very able people to push it forward. In his first tenure, the External Affairs Minister, Ms. Sushma Swaraj, she gave a definite push to the type of foreign policy which we should have. That is the time when the cultural aspects came in, when our embassies all across the world, they suddenly started becoming much more amenable to the Indian populace there, and their behavior patterns changed. Now, this was not an accident. This was a deliberate attempt, done by Sushma Swaraj based on the policies of the Prime Minister. You see, to interact very, very forcefully with the local diaspora. That change, that trend, that change as far as our own diplomats are concerned in how they interacted with their own citizens has undergone a sea change. And I think the third change which has come about is Indian foreign policy is no longer apologetic. You see, if we will say it as it is, and we see no reason really to align with any one party. Now, in the second tenure with the foreign ministers, his eloquence is absolutely, he's second to none. His eloquence is absolutely outstanding. And anytime anybody hears Mr. Jaishankar, one thing which strikes you is the total clarity of thought. And secondly, there are no ambiguities. So when you're listening to the External Affairs Minister, people are very, very sure of what India stands for. And now, to put it into very simple language, India now has made it very clear, India stands for India. ये भारत जो है ये भारत के लिए काम करेगा, to put it into a very simple language. So when the Americans say, which side are you on? I mean, and they're trying to tell us that democracy means you have to support the West in the war against Ukraine. I think they have misunderstood the entire concept of democracy. You see, India's stand is to stop this war. India's stand is not to take sides either with Russia or with the Americans. That doesn't make sense to us. So we will look into our interests, and we will look into stopping the Ukraine war or any other conflict to the best of our abilities. Our aim is not to prolong conflicts, but if India can use its energy to stop it and tell both parties to lay off, I think they will use that influence. But then obviously you have to be called upon to do it. And simply poking your nose into somebody else's business sometimes backfires much more than we expected to. So I don't think that is really India's aim. But when we say we are the mother of all democracies, I think we are saying that let the will of the people prevail. But as far as India is concerned, we will not be dictated to by any of the rival camps. There may be a Western camp and there may be a Russian side. You can call them the dictators. But then India is a camp in its own right, and we will do what is good for India. I think that is the shift which has taken place in India's foreign policy. And it is a very, very important shift, let us put it bluntly, which was not there earlier. When we look at the India prior to 2014, we were a very, very hesitant nation. If we went to Israel, we also went to Palestine. But now those days are over. I mean, the Prime Minister will go. The Prime Minister himself has been to Israel. He spent a day there and he came back. He saw no reason why it should be linked up with the Palestine question. And then, of course, he goes to Palestine and he doesn't link it up with Israel. So we are in that situation. We'll be friendly with Iran and with Iraq. You see, we'll be friendly with Syria. That doesn't mean that we are against any other country. So we will maintain our relationship with other countries, and we will not hyphenate them. That fundamental shift of de-hyphenation in India's foreign policy, I think, is what the change reflects. and which is really looking at Indian interests. So to that extent, yes, we are the mother of democracies, but we are actually practicing it. Now, one more point I want to bring about here, because this has been worrying me and I've been speaking about it also. It is because India is maintaining an independent stance that there are certain countries which are not too happy about it. So we are looking at events taking place in India where external agencies are deliberately raking up trouble in an attempt to set the country on fire and hope for a regime change next year when the elections take place, so that a more pliable government is in Delhi, which they can actually play around with. That is not going to happen, but those attempts are being made. Those attempts will be defeated, and India will maintain its its foreign policy independence and its independence on economic and other issues to follow India's interests. Aditya.
No, very well said, actually. Those attempts are right there, and I think those are American attempts, I can say openly. And the one of the things are so the in the if you look at the NATO today, and some reports have actually come out, and I can only speak on publicly generated reports for the benefit of all the students who are watching. It's said that they want India to join NATO, and some of them are saying that indirectly the talks are going on, or something is being proposal is being sent. And as soon as that report came out, and there was a Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar's public appearance at the India Today conclave, or some conclave which happened a few days back, and he openly said that Russia is our ally since 1955, more or less, and it's going to continue that way because our relationships have stood with time. So both the things reports coincided directly, and there was a direct reply, and it was a very calculated reply also. I can see that, because I think the feelers were sent by the NATO to include India in the NATO. So how is that even feasible, given the India's track record and India's position since a very long time of non-alignment with anybody?
Actually, just a few days back, I heard the External Affairs Minister in the News 18 event. Their event was titled Rising India, and he spoke in that event. Now, he has enumerated the points which I have just made. I mean, basically, I'm reiterating what the External Affairs Minister said, that he said that we will maintain the independence of our foreign policy. That he was very, very clear about. But this question of joining NATO, I don't think was addressed or did even come up during this conference. But the point is, there is no way in which India is going to join NATO. I'm surprised that it has even been put on the table, because India will not join an organization like NATO. There is no question about it. However, when we are looking at Indian interests in the Indo-Pacific, then it suits our interest to have an organization like the Quad, where we can cooperate with each other. It is not an alignment in that sense, but it is really a grouping of like-minded countries who want to keep the Indo-Pacific free and open. Now, that is our strategic interest. But that does not mean that we are going to align with NATO as far as this particular issue is concerned. That is, in my view, that is very, very far off the cards. In fact, it is off the table. This discussion of India joining NATO is not going to take us anywhere. So India will maintain its independent stance, and it will continue to remain a viable member of the Quad. But at the same time, it will also remain a member of the SCO and of the BRICS. You see, so that is where the difference will come. As we said, as I had stated earlier, India is looking at India's interests, and our interest, if we call ourselves, the mother of democracy and the Vishwa Guru, then our interest is in world peace. I mean, India can grow fastest if the world is at peace, right? We are not exporting weapons, we are not exporting terror. So our aim will be to maintain peace and not to get involved in that fight. If it is a Western fight, if you look at Ukraine, there is a group of two Western tribes. You see, white Christian tribes are fighting against each other. Now it is a tribal war being fought in one part of Europe. I think we should let them fight it out and do what they have to do. I mean, hopefully they come to an accord and bring peace. But for India to say, okay, it is their war and so I must join in, no, I think any analyst who states that has got it hopelessly wrong. The present Indian dispensation will not do that. We will stay clear of this war, right? We are not going to vote against Russia. We are not going to support Russia either. But we are not going to sort of say that we join up with the NATO camp and then, try to provide arms and ammunition, etc., to NATO, especially in Ukraine. Because ultimately what people are looking for is the Indian armed forces. And Indian armed forces that will be used to protect India and not to fight other people's wars. I think that thing should be made very clear to each and every person who's looking into foreign policy issues.
No, you have made it very clear, because that's exactly the point, is to get the Indian armed forces, because they know what happened in World War I and World War II. And the Anglo-Saxon Protestant victory over the Hitler was largely due to the presence of Indian soldiers, World War I, World War II. And viewers can also watch pictures on Google. They can Google those pictures also, where Indian soldiers walking in France in 1914 and 15, and also Indian soldiers fighting in Africa, in Germany, in Northern Africa, in Turkey. All these pictures are available. Palestine also. It was the Indian soldiers who freed Palestine from German control during that time also. So coming to the east side, we call it down under, but that is a very bad way to reflect the country, and which has openly said that AUKUS, they are not going to be part of any war on Taiwan through AUKUS. They openly said it. In fact, in AUKUS, one name is Australia, AUKUS, AU. And so they also declined that. Is it due to the Indian influence, or because India has a free trade agreement with Australia and not yet with UK? It is still hanging. And I think the Khalistani issue may even push it further back. So what do you see about down under?
As far as Australia is concerned, they've gone in for the AUKUS deal, that is Australia, the UK, and the US. That is really for their security interest. Let us remember, Australia is a huge country and it needs to protect itself. It doesn't have that sort of military capability to protect itself. And now when they are getting nuclear part submarines, not nuclear weaponized submarines, nuclear part submarines from the United States, that is going to be a game changer as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, because it'll be very difficult to detect these submarines and they could be anywhere. So I think that for the Chinese, this is going to be certainly a cause of concern. But for India, I think it is good news, because you require that sort of capability in the Indo-Pacific to keep the Chinese out. So I think what Australia is looking at is much more of a defensive measure as far as they are concerned. The AUKUS will really be to supplement that, to give the Australians the capability to defend themselves. Now, coming down to Taiwan, it is my view, and in my military opinion, that after seeing what the Ukrainians have done to the Russian military, I have a feeling that the Chinese will be very, very circumspect before they go on an offensive to retake Taiwan. Taiwan is an island which is 100 miles from the Chinese coastline. So for the Chinese to get inside there and to hit out at targets, they can only do so through missiles, through the air, and through naval bombardment. They can actually use the Air Force to paradrop troops in, but I have a feeling that they will be destroyed. Now, for them to land the troops into the island, into Taiwan, the physical landing of troops will require their ships to reach there. And I think the Taiwanese Navy has the capacity and the capability to destroy those incoming ships. So it is going to be something which is going to be very, very costly for China to take the island by force. And I think they're cognizant of that fact. So they are not going to attempt a military operation. But should they do so, I think what the US and other countries will do is to ensure that Taiwan has the capability and the capacity to defend itself against aerial attack and to a shipborne assault. Once they can do these two things, they will be quite safe. Whereas if China starts using missiles on the Taiwanese homeland, on the Taiwanese territory, then I think Beijing can also be hit from Taiwan in an equal manner. So will Beijing or will Xi Jinping actually take that risk? That is a $1 million question. I have my doubts. In my view, what Xi Jinping will attempt is a regime change operation in Taiwan, where they can put people supportive of the KMT, the Kuomintang in power back there, and then those forces will align together and say we want to join China. So they will try this sort of an approach, which which won't require direct military conflict, because there will be a fear in the heart of the Chinese. I don't think the military leadership has got great deal of competence. I think their leadership will be on line with the Russian military leadership, which proved quite ineffective in the Ukraine war. And the Chinese may face a similar situation. Will they risk it? My gut feeling says no. Will they try to change the regime and do an internal change and make, create conditions within Taiwan so that they join China? I would rather go for that hypothesis.
No, you spoke of, you are an expert. Viewers should know that you are serving high-ranking Indian military official, retired now. So in your military assessment, you mentioned about the losses suffered with the Russian forces. Very few people know about it. In fact, I also not aware of that. So what is the extent in which the Russian military leadership did not perform as per their reputation, and which you see, and how does it compare with the Indian military leadership eventually to such a conflict?
You see, as far as Russia was concerned in this particular war, the aim was never to capture Ukraine. And even today, that is not the aim of Russia. They don't want to capture Ukraine. They wanted a simple regime change operation, and they thought they would be able to execute it within 3 days. Now, the way they move their armor, as if it is a drill square operation, it's a peace exercise. Well, they were looking at disaster. I don't think the Russian generals, the military leadership, understood what they were doing. They thought they would get a walkover, that they would come, the Ukrainians will give up, and, it will be a flag, the Russian flag will come up, they'll wave, they'll shake hands, they'll carry out a regime change and go back. I think they should have catered for stiff resistance coming up from the Ukrainians. Their military has been built up over the last 10 years by Western agencies. So it wasn't they've got a very strong standing military there. So it could never have been a walkover. So for them to have assumed so, I think they have made a very serious strategic blunder. However, after that initial phase, they have redefined their tactics, and they have actually taken control of the coastal areas. That is the Donbas region, Zaporizhia, and the province which is next to that. I'm just forgetting that name. Now, so by and large, about 90% of the Black Sea or 75% of the Black Sea coast is under their control, and the Sea of Azov is totally under their control. So as far as the Russians are concerned, they have got a land link now to Crimea, which hosts the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And that is what they were really interested in. Odisha is still lying open. That means Odisha, which is a Ukrainian territory, it is still with the Ukrainians. But I think you can actually, the Russians will be trying to get a peace deal on the existing line, with the threat that if you don't accept this line, then we have a chance to go at Odisha, and then you will become a landlocked country. Ukraine will take the hit. At some point of time, Ukraine will take the hit. They have been made the guinea pigs in this particular war. It is foreign weapons which have been pumped into this country to make them fight against the Russians. It is the Ukrainians who have been killed. The Russians have also suffered very heavy casualties in terms of aircraft, in terms of drones, in terms of armored vehicles, and in terms of the number of people killed. But the Ukrainians have suffered far more. And I think the last battle, which is now going, that is at Bakhmut, that is going to be a very critical battle. No side wants to give in. Russia has got about 70% of Bakhmut. The Ukrainians are holding about 20 to 30%. And if they lose control of Bakhmut, I think then that battle is over of the coast. And the Ukrainians will then be looking for a peace option. the terms won't be very good as far as Ukraine is concerned, but they will have to settle for something. That's the way I think this war is going to go.
So in the if you look at the Russian-Ukrainian war, one thing is there, like the world has seen the hypocrisy of the Western countries. That is one thing is very clear in that war. Even though Russia has had a tough time, but eventually they are winning now. And I was hearing that Bakhmut is almost done. The operation is done. That was I was hearing yesterday. But if I contrast it with the Indian military strategy and the Indian military uh, out, outlook, if you look at it, then the how does the Indian military stand in front of such an aggression by Chinese or any other force, combined Western agencies propping up Pakistan? Like, oh, this can happen. Actually, this can happen also. That Pakistan may be opened and the collective West may be invested in that. So, how do you see that happening?
When we look at the threat perspective, I won't talk about the threat from the oceans because the Indian Navy will be, as of now, it has the capability to defend national concerns, and I don't think there's going to be a major problem there. But when you're looking at the land frontier, I think the two threats which emanate against India, one comes from the Chinese PLA, and the second is from the Pakistani military. Now, talking of the Chinese PLA first. I think one thing we simply need to understand, any battle fought between India and the PLA will be fought on the Tibetan Plateau. Now, the China is not in a position to put the aggregate total of its complete military might onto the Tibetan Plateau. So they will be using a part of the force which they have against India. Now, the Indian military is well poised to take on any Chinese misadventure either in Arunachal Pradesh or in eastern Tibet, eastern Ladakh. And this threat will come really because the base will be Tibet. Now, for any Chinese adventure to succeed or misadventure to succeed, they would require control of the airspace. As of now, they don't have that level of control by which they can dominate the skies, because the fight is not going to be fought over the Himalayan mountains. The fight is going to be taken across on this airspace above the Tibetan Plateau. The complete thousands of kilometers of airspace over the Tibetan Plateau is where this war will be fought by the air forces of the two respective countries. And I think as of now, China does not have the capacity or the capability, in my view, to win that war. And so long as it lacks that capability, they will not go into a war. They know the results. It will result in a regime change in China, certainly, if they lose any conflict on the air. Now, China has got some very strong capability, which we must understand. They have got very strong space capabilities. They've got very strong cyber capabilities, and they've got very strong missile capabilities. They will attempt to use all three of them, but we are in a position to counter all of them. We had a problem earlier as far as anti-satellite weapons were concerned. So there was a possibility that China can take out our satellites. But now we have our own ASAT capability, which is a deterrent. So if China attempts to do something like taking out an Indian satellite, then we have the option to take out their satellites and render their operations null and void. So I think to that extent, we have reasonable deterrence capability built in. The last point I want to give as far as China is concerned, if a war comes with China, India will have to fight that war alone. No other country is going to come to India's aid. So Russia, at the best, will remain neutral. The United States will not provide any aid to India in the form of troops, etc., etc. But they will provide something far more important. And that they will provide in terms of the various agreements which we have already had with the United States. And what we are really looking for is intelligence. And once you get intelligence-based operations, and the battlefield picture becomes, the transparency of the battlefield going deep inside Tibet is very clear, I think that gives you an advantage which is unbeatable. So as of today, I am not too concerned about any major Chinese, pushing for a war on the Eastern Front, either on Arunachal or Ladakh. The bigger fear has been always that they will keep doing that, that the small little encroachments, they will come to an area, occupy something which is unoccupied, and then say this is ours. Now we have resisted that for the last 5 years. And I think China has got the lesson that, okay, India is not going to accept that. So there is, as of now, 50,000 troops from Indian side deployed in eastern Ladakh and an equal number from the Chinese side. While it is not eyeball to eyeball confrontation, all of them are located, deployed in high altitudes in very, very difficult terrain, and they are ready to fight this war. So if push comes to shove, well, we will fight, and not just fight, we will win. That clears China. Now we come to Pakistan. Over the last decade, I have been taking forth this point to various audiences that Pakistan is no longer a military, what we call a military threat to India in the conventional sense. So if we talk about about a war with Pakistan, the Pakistan Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, no, they don't have the capacity to wage a war against India. And even if they do, their capacity to last is not there. So they know it, and that capacity is over. So as a conventional threat, Pakistan is no longer a conventional threat. However, should we have a war with China, then the possibility of the Pakistanis joining hands with China and entering and trying to boost them up in a conflict with opening up another front with India, that exists. But on its own, Pakistan poses no threat at all. They still pose a very severe and a very potent terrorism threat against India, but that we have actually negated to a very large extent through the abrogation of 370, by which the linkages which Pakistan had with certain groups in Kashmir, all those linkages stand broken. So now those fifth columnists who would actually collaborate with Pakistan in the terrorism efforts is over. We have got a very effective counter-terrorism grid in place. We have got a very effective administrative structure in place, and we have got a political authority which is very firm on this issue. So as of now, I do not foresee a major threat from Pakistan, especially a conventional threat, though they will continue to, try to pump in terrorists into India and, do whatever the little bit of which they have been trying. But they have in a sense, I think a warning has been given to them that if something major happens in India and we trace it to you, then there will be consequences. So there will be surgical strikes. There may be other actions taken, but there will be consequences. And the present position of Pakistan, where their economy is in tatters, where the internal security situation in Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh, including in Gilgit-Baltistan, is very, very poor, and where there is total political instability, I don't visualize Pakistanis even looking towards India. I think if they can address their concerns with Afghanistan, that, to my mind, will be a very great achievement for Pakistan. Today in India, Pakistan is no longer a matter of concern. In fact, just the other day, one of a very senior journalist from academic from Pakistan who settled in the UK had come, and she made a very pertinent statement. She says, when she had come to India about 10 years ago, at that point of time, when she met a vast amount of people in India, nobody had any sort of ill will to Pakistan. He says, this time when I went, of course, the ill will is still not there. But he says, this time nobody's even concerned about Pakistan. They said, she made it a statement. She said, Pakistan has been reduced to irrelevance in the Indian masses. They know, okay, there is a country there. Okay, it's Pakistan. I mean, that's about it. But you just know it exists. It is irrelevant to India. So we have reduced Pakistan to irrelevance, and we will be able to hold off any Chinese offensive as far as the Tibetan Plateau is concerned. I have got no doubts about that.
Given all the American and Western agencies who are working against India to do a regime change and in eventuality of any conflict, how reliable is the dependence on American intelligence help? Is it possible? Because India can build their own satellites.
No, actually, you see, when we're looking at these relationships, they're very, very complicated relationships,
Very complicated.
So just because we are, just because we are not joining the American war effort in Ukraine, and we have not condemned the Russians, to put it bluntly. Oh no, no, right. American concerns, American interests, the Japanese interests, and the Australian interests, along with India, align perfectly in the Indo-Pacific. We have a different set of interests as far as the continental shelf is concerned. So on the Eurasian heartland, Indian interests are different and we differ from American interests. But on the Indo-Pacific, there is a complete alignment. And I think basically, regardless of anything which may come, the amount of goodwill which Indians have for the people of America, that is very, very strong, that people to people connect. I'm not sure what the people from the American side view in India, but from the Indian side, there's a great deal of goodwill for the US. So, you can talk to them. They are fellow democracies. So, well, they are pursuing their own interests in certain ways. Well, I don't blame them for that. I mean, you're a strong country. You want to do it. If you can get away with it, good enough. They've been getting away with it for so long, and they were quite happy. Now they're not getting away with it, and they're still quite happy. It's okay. They made a bid. It didn't work. But I think the Americans know very well their future strategic competitor is not Russia, it is China. And they are very wary of that. So they will do nothing as far as, trying to hurt India to that extent. All that they want is a sort of a friendly regime which will follow their policies, etc., etc. But it is not just American intelligence agencies. There are certain Western intelligence agencies. Especially there are certain agencies which. Anyway, I don't want to name any of them now, but they have an agenda, and whatever that agenda is based on religion and economics and other issues, but that they have that agenda to promote certain things within India to promote their interests. That's about all. And we know how to handle them. I think the government has become very conscious of what is happening. And without being too harsh or something, you have simply tightened your procedures of the inflow of foreign funds, by which the earlier rules and regulations which were existing are now being applied. Otherwise, they were being completely flouted by external agencies. Now we have simply told them you will apply those rules which have not come up now during the BJP regime. They have been existing there for the last 50 to 75 years. So those rules already existed. They were flouted openly, and people said, okay, it doesn't really matter. We are the West. We are the good guys and we can do what we want. Well, we are also the good guys and we will do what is in our interest. I mean, so that's the way things are going.
But my last question is, I think I asked in the first show also. And Mahabharata repeatedly gives us example, Ramayana gives a repeated example that always fight the war on enemy territory. Never fight the war on your territory. And this was none other than Narad Muni asks Yudhishthir. This is a Indian historical thing, Mahabharata, which everybody should read, by the way. But we always somehow our leadership, our military, and Yudhishthir was a military man. Yudhishthir was not a civilian. He was he was trained in armed forces, and he was well aware. He was known for arranging militaries in a large scale. Now this question is asked by Narad, and Yudhishthir says, yes, I do it. So all the wars you'll see in Mahabharata were fought in maybe in like today's Persia or northern side, Uttar Kuru. Uttar Kuru is above Kyrgyzstan area. And so most of these wars were fought there. And some of the major family wars were fought within India in Kurukshetra. But if you look at before pre-Mahabharata and post-Mahabharata, all the wars were there. How strongly we take those teachings or instructions seriously?
I think, as a part of strategy, I don't think we have really studied, these strategies.
As Jaishankar has been quoting it extensively, Mahabharata.
But now the change has taken place. You see, I think Indians are very comfortable in quoting Western sources. But now increasingly I'm seeing there's that change is coming about. We are looking into our own scriptural heritage, which is a very, very strong heritage, and which the wisdom of the ages is contained there. I think we are looking into that. So, as far as India is not an aggressive power. We don't want to sort of go and capture foreign lands, but we are certain that we want to protect ours. Now, just to give you an example, Pakistan has been fomenting terror for I think now 4 decades in India. About this is the fourth decade going on. What is the state of Pakistan today? I think the Prime Minister made a statement in one of his speeches: "I'll make them go to the world with a begging bowl," and that is exactly what Pakistan is doing. There is an element of India in the Pakistani condition today. Let us have no doubts about it. So Pakistan is in dire straits because of India's policies. And I think that lesson has gone across very well to Pakistan, but they don't know how to get out of it. I think it is a lesson which China too should learn, that over the long term, if you do this, there will be consequences for China. On China, there is one more point I want to give, that is their relationship with Russia is very strong now. But over the long term, it can never exist. There is a natural hostility between the Chinese and the Russians, because the Chinese are looking at Russian land. They're looking at the Russia's eastern limits, and that is where the Chinese will actually march in one day. I think the Russians are cognizant of that, and they will at some point of time keep the Chinese at arm's length. They don't want the Chinese to get too close, but it suits their interest to ally with China now, because the Americans, I think, have played a card which they want to sort of neutralize Russia and then take on China. In my mind, I don't think that is a correct strategy. But anyway, that is what has been applied. So that is there. For India, I think the more important issue today is really getting on with the economy. And there are two things which have happened, which have really changed the shape of this country. And none of this has been talked about really. One is the way the GST has been handled now. It is a complete success story, the way the GST has come about. And every year now, the GST collection is going to increase. The formal economy is getting bigger and bigger, and the informal economy is shrinking. So large parts of the informal economy, because of the GST, is getting formalized now. And it is going to have a completely revolutionary impact as far as the country is concerned. And the second is the way digitization has taken place. It is unbelievable that you go to any stall, the poorest of the poor, a chap who's sitting on the road, just putting a mat there and mending shoes. And, the cost is say $1 or $2. And he doesn't take the payment in cash. He takes the payment digitally. And when you tell that chap, listen, here's the cash, he will tell you, Saab, aapke paas Paytm nahi hai kya? It's a reverse thing. Indians have taken to digitization in a way which is unbelievable. This has reduced corruption to a very, very great extent. The money which has to go to the poorer sections of India's society has been correctly targeted. And I think this is a success story which people really should start talking about. India has changed, and it has changed in the sense that the mindset change has taken place. I mean, nobody feels that they are poor now. Now the chap, the Indian, who's at the lowest scale, he doesn't say I'm poor. She will say, well, I just don't have money, but I'm not poor. And I can make that money, and I can do it. That mindset change is what is going to cause a tectonic shift as far as India's economy is concerned. And when that economy keeps rising the way it is, keeping the defense expenditure at the same level of GDP, your defense expenditure will double. It goes without saying. So the resources which will be available to defend the country, both in space, in air, in naval terms, and for the ground forces, is going to be tremendous. You are looking at a new India, and I think this story has just started. That is what we are talking about, the rising India, which all the programs are taking place. They say, ye kahani to ab shuru hui hai, or we will see how far it goes.
So the one last question on this series, in this show actually, and it has come from the audience now, some student has asked me, is that the world is trying to break India. And European nation states, the whole concept evolved. So when the European states were going back to Europe after colonization period, which I think has never ended, still continuing in a different way. And that time they divided all the countries into small, small parts. So in India was divided 1919, Afghanistan was created. 1947, Pakistan was created. 1948, Burma was created out of India. It was part of the dominion of India, which was divided. And we have seen all these countries getting uh, independent and of the large mass of India. Now, those countries which are separated, they were never designed to be ruled independently. They were provinces of India, which were dependent on the mainstream India, mainland India. Now they have been divided, and you can see that all of them have failed actually economically and politically because they did not have the mindset of ruling, and they were just occupying pieces of land supported by the Western agencies. And now, since the Western agencies are going down and the dollar is going down, it will be more difficult for them to sustain themselves. So now, when we say when in India people say that we are not after anybody's land, but these lands belong to India. So in any case, in during those times, so what do you have to say on that kind of these attempts are being made to divide India, which you have already answered actually part of it before.
These fault lines, every country has fault lines. India too has them, but and so those attempts are being made, right? So we are going to see certain Muslim groups get up and start doing something of their own. You will start having Christian groups doing something. You will start having the farmers carrying on some agitation here and there, and all of them will, the Khalistanis, of course, they will also put in their bit. All of these have foreign funding. I've got no doubts about it, and the funding is continuous. So those attempts will be made. But the question is, we are cognizant of it. And this time the government will deal with it with a very soft hand, but they won't be allowed to erupt. So to that extent, I don't, while those attempts will be made, I don't think there's going to be a very major impact, but it is going to, it has already started. It is going to continue. It'll pick up pace in May, June, July, August. It'll reach its peak in December, January, February. That has no doubt. But what will that peak be? I think it'll be controlled. So to that extent, I'm not really. No, we are concerned, yes, but no, but we'll handle it. I mean, I'm quite confident of that. Also, you have the government; they've got the political will; they'll handle it. As far as territories are concerned, as a cultural concept, India has always been homogeneous. We've lost a part of that cultural space. Myanmar has got a long history of independence. It's not that it was a part of India. They have when you go back into Myanmar's history, they can trace it for a very, very long time. But there were, of course, very strong linkages with India. And when we're looking into beyond Afghanistan into Persia and all that, those linkages were always there. I think what we're trying to do now is to reclaim our heritage. And without, earlier we were very apologetic of reclaiming our heritage, but now we say so straight, okay, if yoga is an Indian product, yoga is a Hindu product, period. If you like it, good enough, it'll help you. If you don't like it, well, do something else. We are not apologetic about it, but yoga has become an international movement. Hindu philosophy, the philosophy of Sanatan Dharma, will also become a universal movement. It will start, and I think that is the movement. That space will expand. It cannot shrink any further. That space will expand, and it will keep expanding. It is not a philosophy which will threaten others. It is a philosophy which others can use to promote their own health, their own welfare, to promote the interests of their own families and their own groups and countries. It is something which can be beneficial to all. So in a non-threatening way, I think India's soft power in that sense is going to expand. Your cultural influence is certainly going to expand. And territorially, there is no reason why any other country should be politically ruled from Delhi. But we can have very strong cultural and social contacts, which I think is, as of now, the right way to go.
Actually, just one small point has come in because you're giving so many things to me, and I have to cover that one. Otherwise, I'll miss out in the next show. Uh, See, the West always and believe me, always have interfered in every other part of the world, and it is continuing since 1492. That's where since then they have been doing it. But why do the Asian countries don't have the mindset of interfering in the West, except China? China is doing it in a very strong way. China is influencing. Confucius Institutes are in every single college of North America. Every single college is huge funding. And Chinese are doing it through apps, through education, through everywhere else. But India has always been on the defensive side. We are always absorbing, and we are taking strength in our own culture to absorb the shocks. But if the conditions are reversed, won't you think the West will respect more?
Well, I think one of the major problems, if you look back at Indian history over the last 1,000 years, while the cultural concept is very clear, and we were a civilizational state, I think politically we fought with each other for too long. So there were these local wars which really weakened India and led to foreign influence settling in. That is one, and number two, I think for whatever reason we disregarded military power. Once you come to a mindset to say that, okay, we are good chaps, and it is always the pen which the pen is mightier than the sword. Well, I've always maintained, yes, the pen is mightier than the sword, but if you take away the sword, then the pen is absolutely useless. You see, the pen can't defend itself. So the pen is mightier than the sword so long as it has the sword to defend itself, right? I think India needs to get into a different sort of a mindset now, that once you have eliminated threats from your borders, do not think in terms of, say, okay, we can do away with the military, we can do away with offensive weapons, because that is a sure sign of other people coming in and taking what you have built by force. That is what the Westerners did. That is what the Muslim invaders did. They simply came here, they looted whatever they could, they went back. And then this loot continued. People came in, they looted, they went back, and then some of them started staying. And then when the Europeans came, well, they simply came here, they settled down, and they took away the wealth of India. Now I think we've got to be strategically much more aware of what the situation is. Keep your powder dry, keep your military strong, and keep it behind, and keep improving your economic power. That, I think, is the way to go. Become a very strong economic nation, but don't ever let go of your military power. You let go of your military power, you will lose your economic power. I think that is the lesson which we have to learn.
Very well said. Very well said. And thank you so much, General Katoch, for coming on the show. And for all the viewers who are watching, do share it and let us know your feedback. Namaste.